The terminal was alive with the usual morning rush, families hugging goodbye, business travelers checking their watches, and flight attendants calling passengers to the gate. Among them was Captain James Walker, a man seasoned by thousands of hours in the sky. Yet today, a weight pressed on his chest that he couldn't explain. The announcement echoed, "Final boarding call for Flight 237 to San Francisco." As he stepped onto the jet bridge, James felt the world behind him fade away. The hum of engines, the sterile smell of the cabin, the polite greetings, it all blended into a rhythm he knew well. But something lingered in the air, something that whispered this flight would not be like any other. And before we continue, if you believe stories of courage and survival deserve to be told, take a moment now to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful narratives to life. Once the passengers were settled, the cabin lights dimmed and the crew began their familiar dance. Safety instructions, seatbelts fastened, trays locked. Laughter mixed with quiet yawns as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. To anyone on board, it was just another Tuesday morning in the sky. Inside the cockpit, Captain Walker and his first officer ran through their pre-flight checklist. Every switch, every dial, every confirmation was precise. The engines roared to life, propelling the massive jet into the clouds. But beneath the calm, James couldn't shake the gnawing unease. His co-pilot joked about an early landing, yet the captain's eyes lingered on the radar longer than usual. Somewhere deep inside, he sensed that fate had already shifted course, though no one else on board could feel it. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin settled into a peaceful rhythm. Passengers scrolled through magazines, sipped coffee, and gazed at the endless ocean of clouds. Then, barely audible at first, an unusual transmission cracked through the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, this is flight." Static swallowed the words, but Captain Walker froze. His co-pilot looked at him uncertain. The message repeated, clearer this time. "SOS, we are not in control of the aircraft." The captain's hand tightened on the controls. His instinct screamed that this was no ordinary emergency drill. Another plane flying the same corridor was sending a desperate signal for help. James adjusted the frequency, but the voice was gone, replaced by silence. The only proof it had existed was the pounding of his own heartbeat. Captain Walker leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. He had trained for mechanical failures, weather hazards, even passenger medical emergencies, but never for what that faint signal suggested. His co-pilot asked if they should alert air traffic control immediately. James hesitated. There was something he hadn't told anyone, not even his closest colleagues. Years ago, during a classified mission, he had witnessed a hijacking scenario almost identical to this one. The memory had haunted him ever since, a shadow he buried beneath layers of professionalism. Now, that shadow was alive again. If the SOS was real, then someone, somewhere, was living their final moments. And James knew more than anyone else what such a signal truly meant. The weight of that knowledge pressed against him like the very sky above. In the cabin, the atmosphere was calm, almost serene. A young couple whispered excitedly about their honeymoon. A businessman tapped away on his laptop, rehearsing a presentation. Two children giggled as they shared a set of headphones, lost in cartoons. The flight attendants moved gracefully through the aisle, serving drinks and smiling, as though nothing could disturb the safety of their world. To them, it was just another routine trip, another collection of strangers destined to part ways at landing. But the captain's eyes scanned the cabin through the small crack of the cockpit door. He saw innocence, trust, and lives that depended on him. None of these passengers knew that a distress call had echoed through the clouds, that danger was already close. They were flying straight into a storm no radar could predict. Hundreds of miles away, in a dimly lit control tower, radar screens flickered with green dots moving steadily across the skies. Each dot was a flight, each flight a world of lives entrusted to the unseen voices guiding them. Then, one blip broke formation. A transponder signal went dark, and its altitude dropped erratically. Controllers leaned forward, confused. This wasn't turbulence. This was deliberate. Flight 175, respond. Silence. American 11, do you copy? More silence. Whispers spread across the control room. 2 aircraft off course, both unresponsive. And now, a faint echo of an SOS had been intercepted from the same corridor where Captain Walker was flying. One supervisor clenched his jaw. We may have a hijacking. The room fell silent, the weight of those words sinking into every heart. The silence inside the cockpit was broken by a sudden chime from the radio, then a voice, harsh and trembling with tension. Do not move. We have control. Stay away from the cockpit. Captain Walker and his co-pilot locked eyes. The transmission wasn't directed at them, but it was coming from frighteningly close. Another aircraft nearby had just been taken over. James reached for the communication panel, but his hand paused. If the hijackers were transmitting openly, they wanted fear to spread. This was psychological warfare. He looked again at his passengers, still unaware, still smiling, still trusting. He swallowed hard. If this situation escalated, he would have only moments to act. One wrong decision could turn his own aircraft into the next target. The whisper of unease had become a deafening warning. The storm was no longer ahead. It was here. The phone lines on the ground began to buzz with urgency. Families received unexpected calls, voices trembling, words rushed, fragments of terror carried across fragile connections. One flight attendant, her voice breaking, whispered into an airphone, "They have knives. They said there's a bomb. 2 of the crew are down. Please tell them." The line went silent before she could finish. At the same time, Captain Walker intercepted a secondary channel, a fellow pilot, speaking through static. "This isn't an emergency drill. They've taken the cockpit." The final words were swallowed by interference. For a moment, James closed his eyes. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a witness, maybe even the last link between life and the abyss. Every decision he made from this point forward would define not just the fate of his flight, but possibly the fate of thousands. In quiet living rooms and busy offices across the country, telephones rang with chilling urgency. Husbands, wives, and parents picked up to hear voices they loved, shaking, hurried, trying to sound brave. "Don't worry about me. I just need you to know I love you. They say they have a bomb. Pray for us. Tell the kids. Tell them I'll always be with them." On the ground, disbelief clashed with fear. Was this real? Could it truly be happening? Some tried to reassure themselves that it was a misunderstanding, a drill. But as the TV screens filled with smoke and flames from the towers in New York, the truth became undeniable. Every call carried the same finality. Passengers knew their time was short. And for the families, each word became a memory carved into eternity. The once calm cabin erupted into confusion. Passengers who had been sipping coffee now clutched armrests in fear. Flight attendants, trained to maintain composure, struggled to hide the trembling in their voices. From the rear of the plane came shouts, pleas for calm, prayers whispered under trembling breaths. A child cried out for their mother. The hijackers barked orders in broken English, brandishing blades that glinted under the cabin lights. Captain Walker's hands hovered over the controls, his mind split between duty and humanity. He could hear the chaos through the reinforced door, every sound cutting deeper into his resolve. In that moment, the weight of leadership pressed down on him more than ever. He was the barrier between order and disaster, and the barrier was beginning to crack. Inside the cockpit, Captain Walker's mind raced through possibilities. He could follow protocol, wait for ground instructions, keep the passengers calm, avoid confrontation. But with the SOS signals and the chaos behind him, he knew waiting meant surrendering control. Through the static of the radio, a controller's strained voice cut in. "Flight 237, hold course, do not engage." But James clenched his fists. Holding course meant flying blind into whatever the hijackers planned. He looked at his co-pilot, who whispered, "If they breach the cockpit, it's over." Silence followed. Both men understood the weight of those words. The choice was clear yet impossible: obey orders and risk catastrophe, or take matters into his own hands and defy everything he'd been trained to do. For the first time in his career, Captain Walker realized the sky offered no safe choices. The murmurs of fear inside the cabin began to shift into something stronger: resolve. A few passengers locked eyes, silently agreeing that survival depended on action. One man whispered, "If we don't fight back, none of us will make it." A woman, trembling yet determined, nodded. They began to gather makeshift weapons: coffee pots, trays, belts, anything that could be used to strike. In the cockpit, Captain Walker tightened his grip on the controls. His training told him to wait, but his heart told him otherwise. He knew that sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. With every second ticking away, the line between life and death narrowed. The passengers braced themselves. The pilot steadied his hands. The storm had arrived, and resistance was their only path through it. With a sudden roar, passengers surged forward. Coffee pots shattered, trays swung like shields, fists met flesh. The cabin, once filled with quiet chatter, became a battleground of desperate survival. The hijackers fought back viciously, their shouts echoing through the narrow aisle. Blades flashed, chairs toppled, screams filled the air. But the passengers pressed on, driven not by anger but by a single truth: they refused to die quietly. In the cockpit, Captain Walker could hear the chaos crashing against the reinforced door. His hands shook on the yoke as the plane lurched from the struggle behind him. He knew the fight wasn't just about control of the cabin, it was about rewriting their fate. In that storm of terror and courage, ordinary people became soldiers, fighting not only for their own lives, but for countless others on the ground. The plane pitched violently, alarms shrieking across the cockpit. Altitude dropped, then spiked. Loose items flew through the cabin as passengers and hijackers wrestled for dominance. Captain Walker's voice thundered over the intercom. "Hold on, brace yourselves!" He pulled against the controls with every ounce of strength, fighting the physics of chaos. Sweat streamed down his face, his muscles burning as the jet teetered on the edge of control. For a split second, the nose dipped toward the ground, the horizon vanishing from sight. Gasps and cries filled the air. It felt as though the entire aircraft held its breath. Then, stabilization. The plane leveled, trembling but intact. Everyone knew it. They had been a single heartbeat away from catastrophe. 1 second from disaster. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by labored breaths and muffled sobs. The passengers, battered but unbroken, clung to one another. They had fought with everything they had, not just for themselves, but for the lives that would have been lost if the hijackers had succeeded. In the cockpit, Captain Walker steadied the aircraft. His voice was calm, resolute. "We will not surrender, not today." Every soul on board understood. They had transformed fear into courage, despair into defiance. The world below would remember them not as victims, but as heroes. Ordinary people who refused to be powerless, who dared to resist when resistance meant everything. As the final moments of Flight 237 etched themselves into eternity, one truth soared higher than the clouds. Even in the darkest skies, courage can light the way. And before you go, did you already like, share, and subscribe? Your support ensures stories like this one continue to inspire and honor the bravery of those who stood tall when it mattered most.